So we'll now begin with debate going into supply. I recognize the honourable member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
Mr. Speaker, it is my pleasure to rise today to speak into supply on Budget 2022. Last week was Trans Day of Visibility, and at that time we talked about how it was a day to not mourn but rather celebrate the members of the transgender, non-binary and genderqueer communities. We will all review this budget through a range of lenses, from our critic areas to concerns of our constituencies. Today I would like to look at the budget through a rainbow lens. In the spirit of Trans Day of Visibility as a celebration, I want to highlight what could be gained for folks in the 2S LGBTQ+ communities and for all of us in Nova Scotia if we had a rainbow budget. The rainbow community is comprised of people and communities of diverse sexual orientations, gender identities, and gender expressions. Estimates project that between 4 and 8% of Canadians identify as a sexual orientation other than heterosexual, and 2 to 4% of Canadians identify as trans or gender diverse. So with those estimates, we can see that the 2S LGBTQ+ Nova Scotian community is a significant portion in our province, but continue to face systemic barriers due to homophobia and transphobia. My challenge today is to inspire all of us to look at the range of ways we can better support the 2S LGBT communities in our province. The path to rights started with the decriminalization of homosexuality in Canada in 1969. There was a large gap when people were mobilizing and fighting for rights, and then we started to see the expansion of formal rights in my lifetime. In Nova Scotia, sexual orientation was added to the Nova Scotia Human Rights Act in 1991. Same-sex couples gained the right to adopt in 2001 and the right to marry in 2004. And the Nova Scotia Human Rights Act was further amended in 2013 to include gender identity and gender expression. As I've said before, this is not a timeline of peaceful change. This is not a question of government stepping forward proactively to support our communities. Rather, these were changes made after years and decades and centuries of protest and civil disobedience, and they were made by the government in the face of mounting court cases and findings of human rights violations, both in Nova Scotia and across Canada. 2S LGBTQ+ communities have fought for our rights every step of the way. And with rights, the 2S LGBT community has in many ways flourished. Across Canada, Stats Canada, an All-Table report, reports that between 2006 and 2016, the number of 2S LGBTQ couples identifying as such increased by 60.7%. We are also communities of opportunity, with 1/3 under the age of 25 years old. Yet challenges remain. 2S LGBTQ+ youth face barriers to acceptance in education and access to gender-affirming care. Further, family violence and disruption and homelessness cause significant hardship to our community. Prior to the pandemic, in the same Stats Canada report, 2S LGBT Canadians at 27% were twice as likely as their non-2S LGBTQ+ counterparts to have experienced some type of homelessness or housing insecurity in their lifetime. Hate crimes against 2S LGBTQ+ people are on the rise across Canada. In 2019, police reported 263 hate crimes against 2S LGBTQ+ people in Canada, a 41% increase over the previous year, and the highest since 2009. Overall, sexual minority Canadians were more likely than heterosexual Canadians to report they consider their mental health to be poor or fair. They were also more likely to have seriously considered suicide in their lifetime. All that to say, the situation for our rainbow communities is far from perfect. So a budget, as we know, is all about priorities. And usually we use a number of different ways to look for what priorities are in the budget. And I'm sure we've all heard my broken record on this, but I'm going to repeat it again. So there was no mention of the 2S LGBTQ+ community in the Conservatives' platform. And in fact, during the election, they received an F on their responses and platform regarding the communities from the provincial organization, the Nova Scotia Rainbow Action Program. There was no mention of the communities in the speech from the throne. There is no minister. There is no mandate letter that mentions the 2S LGBTQ+ community. And there has been no policy or funding announcement that specifically supports our communities. I note that twice in communications, the Conservatives have made a bit of a desperate grab to note that the proposed changes for fertility funding in the Income Tax Act include 2S LGBTQ+ communities. And rather than letting us know that that's how you're showing your support, in fact, that's how you're showing us that you can still consider us other. We fought that fight. It's not 2005 anymore, it's 2022. Just like any other family in this province, we know that when you're talking about our families, you know that includes us. And I really invite you to think about how you, in your own ways, can expand your vision of what you think of as a family. We continue to lose folks who leave Nova Scotia for more inclusive jurisdictions, for better government systems, better access to health care, better supports for the 2S LGBTQ+ community. So we know what's not in the budget for 2S LGBTQ+ folks. Let's take a trip over the rainbow and imagine what an inclusive budget could look like. I have used the 2021 ministerial mandate letters as inspiration of how to add the rainbow sparkle. First of all, there is limited data on 2S LGBTQ+ experiences in Nova Scotia. An important first step of this Conservative government to demonstrate their commitment to supporting our communities would be committing to gathering data, working together with a steering committee of 2S LGBTQ+ community members and researchers, and undertake a comprehensive survey and engagement process. Then what would we do with the data? There's no one actually in the province who's working on 2S LGBTQ+ issues aside from 0.8 of a person at Pride Health. So there's a need to build permanent capacity in the Nova Scotia Public Service. A 2S LGBTQ+ secretariat or division would find kinship amongst other equity-deserving groups at communities, culture, tourism, and heritage. By funding such a division, the government could create specific policy and program capacity in order to support 2S LGBTQ+ community initiatives. The dedicated expertise could build on community input and fund a 2S LGBTQ+ action plan, as well as the creation of a network. The department could also support 2S LGBTQ+ tourism. For example, many Nova Scotian communities support Pride celebrations. Let's build a rainbow trail around Nova Scotia and highlight Nova Scotia queer history and more. As I said, 2S LGBTQ+ youth continue to face challenges. The Department of Education and Early Childhood Development can provide essential support for our young people by ensuring that 2S LGBTQ+ students, teachers, and community organizations are provided opportunity to engage in the review and development of new diversity curriculum. GSA should be provided with adequate funding and not have to rely on volunteer teachers already stretched because of the pandemic to support clubs. And as an aside, a number of GSAs have not started while other clubs have because of staffing resources. 2S LGBTQ seniors also deserve special consideration. The first generation of seniors, the current generation of seniors, were the first generation who lived their lives, or at least part of them, openly. Nonetheless, this generation started their lives being told they were sick and immoral, that their consensual sexual encounters were illegal, and were systemically excluded from institutions like marriage until 2004. Systemic government policies precluded them from forming legal families, welcoming children, having access to the same spousal benefits, and securing housing. So 2S LGBTQ+ seniors continue to pay the price of this legacy of exclusion. They have not been able to access the same life milestones as their straight and cisgender peers, and may find themselves with fewer supports as they enter their senior years. There's a number of issues that have been identified in a research project here in Nova Scotia. Yeah, and I will table that, about the housing needs of 2S LGBTQ+ seniors. And I would encourage you all to have a look at that research project. It tells us that close to 1/3 of respondents indicated they've had negative experiences due to the housing environment being non-inclusive, such as intake forms containing heteronormative or cis-normative language, staff or landlords making assumptions about their gender identity or expression, and negative interactions with other residents related to the respondent's identity. And the research provides lots of ideas of what we could do better. We need to provide training and information for housing providers and landlords on the housing needs and rights of 2S LGBTQ+ residents. We need better data, and we need inclusive policies and procedures as they relate to 2S LGBTQ+ residents. We also need to look at intergenerational housing approaches that are being rolled out in other jurisdictions in Canada, such as home sharing and cooperatives for our communities. There is so much more that can be done to support the health and well-being of 2S LGBTQ+ folks. Increasing the funding to Pride Health. We've heard about the 0.8 person who's stretched across the province. More funding to community health clinics like the Halifax Sexual Health Clinic. Updating MSI to cover gender-affirming care. Staying up to date by establishing a ministerial advisory committee on gender-affirming care. Providing and making sure that all staff in the system have access to the amazing training developed by Pride Health that can support all medical and health professionals to provide culturally competent care. And there's still more. The Minister of Advanced Education can support medical education programs to increase their capacity to train all professionals in specific care for 2S LGBT communities. I'm looking forward to the creation of a Child and Youth Commission through the Department of Community Services with a particular expertise and support to 2S LGBTQ+ children and youth and their families. The Minister of Labour, Skills and Immigration has been asked to carry out their mandate to build an inclusive Nova Scotia to advance our interests. Students, Nova Scotians who have moved away, people who can work remotely, all of these people would want to come back if they know that the government of Nova Scotia cares about them and will protect them. There should be ongoing support for the efforts of Rainbow Refugees of Nova Scotia to support the immigration of 2S LGBTQ+ refugees and support for the creation of a regional network of refugee welcoming agencies who want to welcome diverse refugees. In economic development, there are enormous opportunities for supporting 2S LGBTQ small and medium-sized businesses in the province, as well as help all businesses to get ready to serve this population when they visit. The UK government, and I'll table this, recognized this last year when they sponsored a national meeting under the leadership of the Minister for Women and Equalities to bring together businesses to champion LGBT equality in the workplace and celebrate the effort of businesses that were supporting their LGBTQ+ employees. Other jurisdictions have done lots of work in this area. Cities like Toronto, Ottawa, and Edmonton have sought to understand their 2S LGBTQ+ communities and how to support them. In Toronto, and I'll table some documents related to this, the city created a 2S LGBTQ+ advisory committee and has worked with this committee to undertake specific initiatives. The City of Toronto also joined the national organization Pride at Work to help ensure its civil servants are working in an inclusive setting. At the provincial and territorial level, the Yukon government stands out. The Yukon Territory released in 2021 a comprehensive 5-year action plan designed to chart a path forward in ending discrimination and making Yukon government programs and services more inclusive of the 2S LGBTQ+ community. Support from the Ontario government resulted in the creation of Rainbow Health Ontario. An example of their important work is the creation of the LGBTQ+ supplement resource for the government's Health Equity Impact Assessment tool, which is required for all health initiatives in the province. The Government of Canada established the LGBTQ Secretariat in 2015. National consultations have concluded and a national action plan is under development. Similarly, the UK government has also released a national survey and action plan starting in 2018 with annual reporting, and I'll table that as well. So I feel like I've given you a bit of a laundry list, but what I really wanted to do was to elicit your ideas and your passion around making change, positive change for Nova Scotia and for all Nova Scotians, and think about how we can better support our 2S LGBTQ+ communities. There's simply too many of us, and we're to leave out of the plan to make Nova Scotia better. Equality gains have been achieved across the globe with the right to equal marriage on 6 continents. At the same time, there's still a long ways to go, as you can see, in getting rid of systemic exclusion. The Conservative government has assured us that they have plans for everything, that they are working towards a strong future that the Premier says he's excited about. And last week, they tabled a compassionate budget. I hope that I have demonstrated in how the Nova Scotia budget for 2022-2023 could have been truly inclusive, ambitious, compassionate, and a rainbow budget. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll take my seat.